European Union is facing a major revolt from a number of member states, and surprise, surprise, it's about migration. Yesterday, the EU voted in favour of a new pact that means all 27 countries in the bloc must take their fair share of asylum seekers or face €20,000 fines for each migrant. But straight away, Poland and Hungary said they will not accept migrants from EU states they dug in, and now they're on collision course with Brussels. And let's cross straight now to Brussels and speak with journalist and expert on the ground, Jack Parrott. Jack, we watched the votes here live on the show yesterday with huge fascination. It scrambled through, but within moments, Donald Tusk, of course, a former European Commission president himself, said no, they would not accept it, quickly followed by Hungary. The EU is at a huge impasse. Will other nation states follow?
So he was a former European Council president, Donald Tusk, and he indeed, what's interesting about him is that he's super pro-EU as having taken that job. But even him as a Polish prime minister now, he's not really in the same political line with the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. But this issue is so contentious in countries like Poland and Hungary that you're right, they immediately came out and said that they wouldn't accept migrants under this system. Having said that, they have agreed to it within the sort of negotiations that got it all the way up until this point in the European Parliament. As you said, it was a knife-edge vote. It was so close, and they needed to approve all 10 pieces of legislation, a piece of legislation related to detention, for instance, another one related to the transfer of migrants, another one to set up a database. They were all interlinked, and they all needed to pass if the pact was going to be approved. Now, many of the MEPs that voted in favour of some parts voted against other parts, depending on their political leaning. It was extremely close. It was a good bit of political theatre, Martin, but most people, I think, that I spoke to that walked away from that vote, while they feel they got it over the line, many of them still aren't completely content with what this pact is going to mean. And as you say, a number of governments already saying they won't be involved and they won't approve certain aspects of it.
And Jack, many member states saying, why should we take allocations of asylum seekers to our country if the EU simply cannot control its seafaring borders? While, of course, Greece and Italy, who have been inundated with numbers, would like to see the numbers dissipated across the member state. The big question now, though, Jack, looking forward, of course, we're looking down the barrels of hugely significant European elections, EU elections coming up in June. We've already seen parties in France across the bloc saying they're going to make hay out of this issue. The Eurosceptic vote could surge as a consequence.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this, Martin, is that people that are sort of anti-immigration and want to prevent immigration into the European Union aren't really happy with the deal because it doesn't have too much in it about returns to country of origin. It does have quite stringent measures about detention on the EU's external borders. And so parties on the left that consider themselves more pro-human rights and want to take a slightly softer line, they're not very happy about that. Like I said, a lot of people that voted in favour of certain aspects of this deal aren't happy with it overall. The hard right and the hard left abstained on or voted against many of the aspects of the deal. There was quite an interesting moment during the votes, Martin, where a group of protesters stood up and said, vote no against this deal, kill the pact. This pact kills, I think, was their chant. And the far left MEPs got up and congratulated them. It was a big sort of scene that happened, and they tried to charge through these votes to make sure they got it. Before the vote, Martin, just as a bit of context to this, it was a number cruncher. It was like watching House of Cards or something. All of the different political factions were trying to find out whether each of the different angles would be able to get enough votes to get it over the line. It was exciting. The deal, is now approved. Important to say that when it relates to the June elections, Martin, this pact won't actually come into enforcement until 2026. So while the people that have tried to push it over the line want it to be a vote swinger, nothing really changes before the elections.
But it will matter to those political parties who are saying we didn't vote for this as a nation. A few MEPs voted for it. They don't represent millions and millions of voters. Why should people in France accept the consequences of MEPs from all over the shop? And I think they will make hay over this. Marine Le Pen has already said that she will. And President Macron, we heard yesterday, was frantically ringing around to try and get Donald Tusk's MEPs to abstain to get this over. So clearly, this is a matter of huge significance within the political bloc.
It is exactly that, but it's politics, not the practical implementation of the changes of this deal. So all of the different political factions will try and sell it that they either won or they're fighting against this when it comes to June's elections. But voters aren't going to see changes in how the asylum process works yet, not until 2026.
But political parties will be able to say, unless you vote against the European Union, unless you vote Eurosceptics in like us, we won't be able to stop this, and it will come.
But the pact is already voted on now as far as the EU goes. So to have to try and overhaul it in the next elections would be really difficult. It's politics. This is it. You're right in some sense that they will try to say that if they're elected in, they'll be able to stop it. But the overwhelming numbers ahead of the EU elections is that the centrist bloc that got this over the line is likely to retain most of the majority in the elections. It's all to play for in June. We'll have to wait and see how that falls out.
Are you hearing, as we did, that Slovakia are eyeing what Poland and Hungary did? And you're right, it is politics, but posturing and playing tough against the EU lands well domestically, particularly when it's about political survival. Who would have thought that the rebel in the midst would be Donald Tusk?
Yeah, that's kind of the big surprise, and the other leaders have tried to get him on board. Like you say, there's grumblings in different countries. For instance, Czechia, for instance, Slovakia. The reason being with Poland as well is because this deal doesn't really, according to them, take into account the hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, in fact, millions of Ukrainians who've entered the European Union. But that's done on a different system. It's not international protection like someone from Afghanistan or Syria might look for. It's, as you know, Martin, extremely complex, and the politics gets played around it. The institutions of the European Union are saying, listen, this deal, though, does actually prevent us and give us much, much more ability to prevent people entering the European Union.